A jagged shard of volcanic glass scrapes against soft skin until blood beads on the surface. A thick, caustic paste of arsenic trisulfide and quicklime blisters the flesh in the heat of a desert sun. The skin turns black and begins to slough away, revealing the raw, weeping tissue underneath. This was not a botched medical procedure, but a daily beauty ritual in the royal courts of ancient Egypt. The quest for a hairless body in the ancient world was a violent, toxic, and often lethal endeavor. The Ebers Papyrus, dated to approximately 1550 BCE, provides the gruesome evidence for this practice. Egyptian healers recorded precise, dangerous formulas intended to dissolve hair at the follicle. They mixed arsenic trisulfide, a potent poison, with calcium oxide, also known as quicklime. When applied to the skin, these chemicals triggered a rapid, localized chemical burn. The goal was to strip the hair shaft completely, leaving the skin smooth and hairless. The reality of this process was far removed from the aesthetic of polished marble statues. Chemical depilatories frequently caused skin necrosis in those who could afford the expensive compounds. The caustic agents did not stop at the surface, often eating through the dermal layers. Systemic poisoning was a constant, unspoken risk for the Egyptian elite who demanded such standards. The pursuit of a hairless ideal ignored the biological cost of these volatile mineral mixtures. Historians often associate these ancient methods with simple, primitive grooming tools. The archaeological record tells a much more complex and dangerous story of human vanity. Beauty in the ancient world was not merely a matter of fashion or social grace. It was a physical demonstration of power that required the endurance of excruciating pain. The transition from flint blades to chemical agents marked a shift in how civilization viewed the body. But to understand why that moment mattered, you need to see the thousands of years of suffering that preceded it. The desire for smooth skin was not a modern invention, but a hallmark of status since the dawn of urban life. Archaeological excavations at the ancient city of Ur in modern-day Iraq unearthed copper razors from the 3rd millennium BCE. These bronze and copper instruments were buried alongside the dead, signifying their importance in daily life. Grooming was a ritualized act, essential for defining the boundary between the civilized and the barbarian. In the pre-dynastic period of Egypt, elites utilized sharpened flint to scrape away unwanted hair. These blades were meticulously crafted, balanced, and kept razor-sharp for a clean cut. The process was time-consuming, requiring a steady hand and a tolerance for frequent jagged lacerations. Yet the cultural pressure to appear hairless remained absolute among the upper classes. Hair was associated with the unkempt, the lower orders, and the chaotic nature of the wild. The Egyptians also mastered the process of sugaring, or halawa, as a gentler alternative. This method involved a paste made from honey, sugar, and water, boiled to a specific, sticky consistency. The mixture was applied to the skin and pulled away, removing hair directly from the root. It was a sophisticated application of chemistry that avoided the toxicity of arsenic-based creams. However, for those seeking the most permanent results, the more dangerous chemical routes remained the standard. Archaeologists have found evidence of these grooming habits across the entire Nile Valley. The practice was not limited to one dynasty or one specific social circle. It permeated the lives of the wealthy, who employed specialized servants to manage the process. The skin of the elite became a canvas for these invasive, painful, and often hazardous techniques. They accepted the risk of infection and scarring as the necessary price of their social standing. The danger was not just in the chemicals, but in the tools themselves. Shared razors in public spaces became vectors for the transmission of skin diseases. Staphylococcus and other bacterial infections spread rapidly through the communal baths of the later Mediterranean world. The lack of sterilization meant that a simple grooming session could lead to deep tissue infection. The reality of the ancient world was defined by this constant, low-level war against the physical body. The historical record left behind by scribes and physicians like Galen confirms the widespread nature of these practices. Galen wrote extensively on the chemistry of depilatories in the Roman Empire. He described the use of dropax, a resinous, pitch-based compound that adhered to the skin. The removal of this substance was designed to rip hair out by the root, similar to modern waxing. But the mixtures often contained far more than simple resin. Ancient recipes included vinegar, lizard blood, and even bat dung, added for their supposed chemical properties. Whether these additions held any real efficacy remains a subject of intense historical debate. Many scholars view these ingredients as a mix of early chemical experimentation and deep-seated superstition. The Roman Alipilus, a slave dedicated to the removal of body hair, managed these materials daily. His work was performed in the public thermae, where the social hierarchy was on full display. The Alipilus used tweezers, known as volcella, to pluck individual hairs from the patrons. The work was precise, tedious, and carried out in the heat and humidity of the bathhouse. Patrons endured the pain as a sign of their status and their commitment to the Roman ideal. The public nature of this grooming reinforced the divide between the master and the servant. The Alipilus was the living instrument of a culture that prioritized appearance above all else. The tradition of the razor extended far beyond the Mediterranean and the Nile. In ancient India, the Sushruta Samhita, a foundational medical text, described the use of the ksura. This was a specialized razor employed for both surgical preparation and personal grooming. The text treated the removal of hair as a medical necessity for the maintenance of health. The ksura was a symbol of the precision that Indian physicians brought to their craft. From the copper blades of Mesopotamia to the caustic arsenic pastes of Egypt, the tools changed. The fundamental drive to alter the human form remained a constant across these disparate civilizations. The cost was always high, paid in blood, infection, and the slow poisoning of the body. This history reveals that the pursuit of beauty has always been a dangerous, calculated gamble. The human cost was simply the price of admission to the elite circles of the ancient world. Archaeologists excavating pre-dynastic Egyptian sites uncovered a brutal truth about the earliest days of civilization. Buried beneath the shifting sands of the Nile Valley, they found tools shaped from volcanic obsidian and razor-sharp flint. These blades dated back to the 4th millennium BCE. They were not weapons of war. They were instruments of personal grooming. The reality was that even before the rise of the pharaohs, Egyptian society demanded the removal of all body hair. Historians identified these artifacts as the direct ancestors of the modern razor. Craftsmen flaked the flint into thin, delicate edges that could slice through hair with a single, precise stroke. The process required immense skill to avoid deep, jagged lacerations. Each blade was balanced and kept in a dedicated leather pouch. These objects signaled a fundamental shift in how humans interacted with their own skin. Hair was no longer a natural state. It was a sign of the wild and the unkempt. To be clean was to be civilized. The elite in pre-dynastic settlements invested heavily in these specialized tools. They treated hair removal as a ritualized necessity rather than a fleeting trend. But to understand why this obsession began, you need to see the harsh environment of the early Nile floodplains. In the intense heat of the desert, hair trapped moisture and parasites. Removing it was a survival strategy that quickly evolved into a mark of high social standing. The archaeological record shows these flint blades often buried alongside the deceased. They were essential enough to accompany the owner into the afterlife. The consistency of these finds across various burial sites proved the practice was universal among the wealthy. It was not a sporadic habit. It was a rigid, cultural requirement that spanned generations. The transition from stone tools to later copper instruments marked the beginning of a long, painful history of physical alteration. The people of the pre-dynastic era set the foundation for a standard of beauty that would persist for millennia. They chose the sharpness of the blade over the natural state of the body. Every scrape of the flint against the skin was a deliberate act of cultural conformity. The pursuit of the hairless ideal was already a dangerous, calculated gamble in the year 3500 BCE. It cost the user in blood and constant risk of infection. Yet the social pressure to maintain a smooth, clean form remained absolute. The history of the razor began not in a modern laboratory, but in the hands of a craftsman chipping away at a piece of black volcanic glass. Ancient Egyptian homes in the Nile Valley maintained a standard of beauty that demanded perfectly smooth skin. Wealthy families in the 15th century BCE relied on a method known as halawa to achieve this result. The process relied on a simple paste made from honey, sugar, and water. This mixture provided a non-caustic alternative to the dangerous arsenic pastes used by others. Women heated the ingredients in small ceramic vessels over low-burning charcoal fires. The substance bubbled and thickened until it reached a tacky, amber-colored consistency. A practitioner applied the warm, sticky mass directly onto the surface of the skin. She pressed the paste firmly into the hair in the direction of natural growth. With a quick, deliberate motion, she pulled the hardened sugar strip away from the body. The hair adhered to the paste and detached from the follicle at the root. This technique left the skin smooth and free of the chemical burns caused by mineral-based creams. The Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BCE, documented various cosmetic preparations used by the elite. These records highlighted the preference for methods that minimized the risk of systemic poisoning. The use of honey provided a natural antiseptic that soothed the skin during the removal process. Archaeologists found evidence of this practice in domestic sites near the city of Thebes. Small, discarded pots, stained with sugary residues, remained in the debris of ancient vanity rooms. These items proved that grooming was a daily, labor-intensive ritual for the upper classes. The contrast between sugaring and chemical depilation was stark and absolute. While arsenic-based pastes caused skin necrosis, the sugar method offered a safer, albeit painful, alternative. The elite valued this method for its ability to maintain a pristine aesthetic without permanent scarring. Every step of the process followed a rigid, centuries-old tradition passed down through household servants. The reality was that beauty in the ancient world required a constant, calculated commitment to maintenance. The sugaring process served as a cornerstone of Egyptian hygiene for over 1,000 years. It allowed the wealthy to project an image of purity that set them apart from the laboring classes. The simplicity of the ingredients masked the intense effort required to achieve the desired result. This was not a fleeting fashion trend, but a foundational element of Egyptian daily life. The legacy of the sugar paste persisted long after the fall of the major dynasties. It represented a rare moment where ancient innovation prioritized safety alongside the pursuit of the hairless ideal. The practice remained a testament to the lengths humans would go to alter their own physical form. The shift toward metal grooming tools occurred in the city of located in modern-day Iraq. Archaeologists excavating the site uncovered copper razors dating back to the 3rd millennium BCE. These objects were not merely utilitarian tools found in the trash. They were carefully crafted artifacts placed alongside the dead in royal burial chambers. The metalworkers of the Sumerian period cast these blades with intentional precision. They hammered copper into thin, curved edges that mirrored the shape of earlier flint tools. The transition to bronze soon followed as metallurgy advanced across the Mesopotamian valley. Bronze offered a harder edge that resisted dulling during repeated use on thick hair. The presence of these items in graves signaled their immense value to the deceased. To be buried with a razor was to carry a mark of status into the afterlife. The elite of demanded a clean, hairless aesthetic that separated them from the laboring class. Historical records confirmed that grooming was a strictly enforced ritual of the upper social tiers. These metal blades required constant sharpening on whetstones to remain effective. The process of maintaining such a tool was a daily commitment for the royal household. Craftsmen in the workshops of produced these items in standardized sets for the nobility. The existence of these tools proved that hair removal was a foundational pillar of early civilization. It established a precedent where the physical body was treated as a malleable object. The metal razor became a symbol of one's ability to control their own appearance. The lower classes relied on crude, makeshift scrapers, while the wealthy utilized these refined metal instruments. The disparity in tool quality reinforced the rigid hierarchy of the Mesopotamian social order. Every hair removed by a bronze blade was a silent declaration of wealth and power. The archaeological record at provided the physical proof of this obsession. It demonstrated that the pursuit of a smooth, artificial form predated many other complex cultural systems. The people of the 3rd millennium BCE viewed the natural state of hair as a rejection of refinement. They invested their best resources into the production of these sharp, metallic edges. The legacy of the copper razor defined the standard for grooming for centuries to come. But to understand why this specific metal tool became a necessity, you need to see the broader shift toward urbanization. As cities grew, the need to visually distinguish the elite from the masses became a matter of survival. The perfectly shaven face served as a permanent, visible badge of one's place in the hierarchy. It was a ritualized act of separation that began in the heart of the Fertile Crescent. The bronze razor remained the primary instrument of that separation for nearly 1,000 years. Across the stone-paved gymnasiums of Athens, between 800 and 146 BCE, the Greek male body existed as a public performance. Athletes competed in the nude at the Olympic Games. The sight of hair on the chest or limbs clashed with the classical ideal of the sculpted, smooth form. But to understand how they achieved this, you have to look at the tools they left behind in the ruins of Corinth. Herodotus, the Greek historian, documented the specific, often brutal methods used to strip the skin clean. He recorded the practice of silothro. This was the art of singeing. A man held a small lamp flame or hot embers near his skin. He carefully waved the heat over his limbs until the hair withered and burned away. The smell of singed protein hung in the air of the training grounds. It was a dangerous, imprecise, and agonizing way to achieve a smooth aesthetic. The reality was that the Greeks valued performance over physical comfort. If the flame failed to catch every stray hair, they turned to abrasive stones. Archaeologists found pumice stones in domestic sites across the Greek peninsula. These porous rocks were used for heavy-duty exfoliation. The user rubbed the stone firmly against his skin until the fine hairs wore away through friction. It left the skin raw and often irritated, but for the athlete, the result was a smooth surface that showcased muscle definition under the Mediterranean sun. These methods were not just for the elite. They were part of the standard preparation for any man entering the gymnasium. The Greek standard demanded a body that appeared artificial and refined. Nature was viewed as something to be corrected through fire and stone. This obsession with the hairless form defined the visual culture of the era. It turned the human body into a canvas for the geometric ideals of the time. Every hair removed was a step toward the perfect, marble-like aesthetic celebrated in their statues. The truth was that this grooming was a constant, grueling labor. It required a commitment to pain that most modern people would find unrecognizable. The transition from the wild to the refined happened in the heat of the training room. The pumice stone and the flame were the primary tools of that transformation. History recorded these methods not as myths, but as the daily reality of the Greek life. The scorched scent of the silothro defined the edge of their grooming rituals. This was the price of participating in the athletic ideals of the ancient world. In the 6th century BCE, the medical landscape of ancient India shifted toward clinical precision. The Sushruta Samhita emerged as the definitive record of this transformation. It catalogued the human body with a level of detail previously unseen in the region. The text served as a foundational guide for both surgery and the maintenance of the physical form. It featured the ksura, a specialized metal razor designed for delicate operations. Archaeological evidence confirmed that these instruments were crafted from tempered steel and bronze. The ksura was not merely a tool for grooming the beard or scalp. It functioned as a primary surgical device for preparing the skin for medical procedures. The text mandated that the skin be cleared of all hair before any incision occurred. This practice minimized the risk of infection during complex surgeries. The ksura featured a curved, sharp edge that allowed for precise control. Ancient surgeons held the razor with a specific grip to ensure stability. The blade was forged to maintain its edge through repeated contact with skin and tissue. But to understand why this tool mattered, you need to see the intersection of health and status. The same razor used by a physician to perform surgery also defined the grooming standard of the elite. A smooth, hairless chest or face indicated that an individual possessed the resources to maintain high hygiene. The Sushruta Samhita bridged the gap between the clinical environment and the private household. It provided instructions on how to handle the ksura to avoid unnecessary trauma to the dermis. The document warned against applying too much pressure during the shaving process. It recognized that lacerations were direct pathways for local infections. This awareness of skin health set a standard for the rest of the ancient world. The ksura was maintained by regular sharpening on a whetstone. Skilled craftsmen in cities across the Indian subcontinent standardized the production of these blades. The metal composition varied, but the functional design remained consistent for centuries. This consistency allowed for a predictable outcome in both surgery and personal grooming. The reality was that the ksura transformed the human body into a controlled, artificial surface. Every hair removed by the blade was a testament to the influence of the Sushruta Samhita. The text elevated the act of hair removal from a mundane chore to a medical necessity. It established a precedent where the physical body was treated as a site for technical intervention. The legacy of the Kshura defined the grooming habits of the Indian upper classes for generations. The blade remained the silent witness to the evolution of ancient medical practice. It was the instrument that bridged the divide between the surgeon's table and the daily ritual of the bath. The pursuit of the smooth form was, in the eyes of the ancients, a pursuit of order. The Kshura provided the means to impose that order upon the body. History recorded these methods not as myths, but as the documented reality of the era. The sharp edge of the blade dictated the boundaries of the acceptable human aesthetic. It was a tool of both healing and vanity, forged in the fires of ancient metallurgical workshops. The Roman public bath, or thermae, served as the central engine of social life in the capital. These massive limestone structures were more than just spaces for washing the body. They functioned as the primary site for the maintenance of the Roman aesthetic. Deep within the heated chambers of the baths, a specific professional class emerged. This was the Alipilus, a slave tasked with the removal of body hair from patrons. The name itself literally translated to the armpit hair plucker. The reality was that the Roman elite demanded a completely hairless appearance. To achieve this, the Alipilus utilized the volcella, a set of bronze or iron tweezers. The process was grueling for the patron and required steady hands from the slave. Historians documented these sessions as a standard feature of the Roman bathing ritual. But to understand why this labor existed, you need to see the stratification of Roman society. A wealthy citizen expected to be groomed without lifting a finger. The Alipilus spent hours each day pulling individual hairs from the skin of his masters. The pain was often intense, yet it remained a required part of the social experience. For those who preferred a faster method, the Alipilus turned to resinous waxes. These sticky substances were spread across the skin and ripped away to pull hair at the root. The thermae provided the heat necessary to keep the wax malleable during the application. This system highlighted the extreme class divide inherent in the Roman Empire. The elite enjoyed the luxury of professional grooming, while the labor remained invisible. The Alipilus occupied the lowest rung of the social hierarchy within these public spaces. His work was constant, repetitive, and essential to the vanity of the Roman public. The documentation of these slaves provides a window into the daily reality of the baths. It was not merely a service, but a display of absolute control over one's environment. Every hair removed by the Alipilus reinforced the status of the person on the bench. The practice ensured that the Roman body remained a polished, artificial construct. The thermae were the stage, and the Alipilus was the technician maintaining the illusion. These public baths were often crowded, loud, and humid environments. The scent of hot water mixed with the sharp smell of resin and sweat. Yet the social pressure to remain hairless forced patrons to endure the sessions. History recorded the Alipilus as a vital, if overlooked, fixture of the Roman world. The tools of his trade, the volcella, have been recovered from numerous archaeological sites. These small metal instruments provide tangible evidence of the labor performed in the baths. The Roman obsession with hairlessness was a defining characteristic of their civilization. The existence of the Alipilus proves that this standard required a massive, exploited workforce. Without the slave, the aesthetic ideal would have been impossible to maintain for the elite. The physical cost was borne by the worker, while the social benefit accrued to the master. This was the documented reality of the Roman bathhouse experience. The Roman physician Galen walked the marble halls of the imperial capital during the 2nd century. He watched the elite of Rome obsess over the smoothness of their skin. Galen documented a specific method of depilation that relied on a substance called dropax. This compound consisted primarily of resinous pitch applied directly to the skin. The material hardened as it cooled, creating a firm bond with the hair. When the practitioner ripped the pitch away, it pulled the hair out by the root. Galen noted that this process was far more aggressive than simple shaving. He observed that the skin often suffered significant irritation following the application of dropax. But the documentation of these methods went beyond simple resin. Galen recorded the existence of secondary mixtures used to supplement the primary treatment. These included substances like ground lizard blood and processed bat dung. The physician described these additives as part of the broader chemical landscape of the era. But to understand why these ingredients were included, you need to see the desperate search for permanent results. The reality was that many of these secondary mixtures lacked any genuine chemical efficacy. They functioned as superstitious additives in a society that craved extreme solutions. Galen wrote his observations with the clinical detachment of a trained medical observer. He categorized these treatments alongside his rigorous studies of human anatomy and physiology. The use of lizard blood and bat dung highlighted the chaotic intersection of early chemistry and folklore. Some practitioners believed these exotic ingredients would prevent hair from growing back entirely. The truth was that they often introduced unnecessary bacteria to the raw skin. Galen tracked the resulting inflammations in the patients he examined after their sessions. He recognized the danger that these caustic mixtures posed to the dermis. The documentation provided by Galen serves as the primary evidence for these ancient grooming habits. It reveals a culture willing to risk infection for the sake of the aesthetic ideal. The Roman elite did not care about the origin of the ingredients on their skin. They only cared about the visual result of the treatment. The drop-axe method stood as a testament to the extremes of Roman vanity. Galen recorded the smells and the textures of the substances used in these rituals. He identified the chemical components that caused the most severe skin reactions. The physician maintained a critical eye on the practices of his contemporaries. He did not shy away from documenting the failures of these experimental depilatories. The records left behind by Galen proved that the pursuit of perfection had a biological cost. Even the most learned men of the era could not escape the grip of these social standards. The drop-axe method remained a staple of the Roman bathhouse experience for decades. It was a ritualized form of self-inflicted pain performed by those with the status to command it. Galen observed the entire process from the perspective of a scholar. He saw the link between the physician's table and the bathhouse floor. The documentation of these chemical depilatories remains a grim window into the ancient world. Every application of the pitch compound was a step toward the polished ideal. Galen captured the details of a society that prioritized the appearance of order above all else. The reality of the drop-axe method was far removed from the refined image of Roman history. It was messy, painful, and grounded in the dangerous chemistry of the 2nd century. The Roman thermae were environments designed for communal cleansing and social elevation. The reality was that these spaces functioned as massive, open-air petri dishes for infection. Archaeological evidence from sites across the empire reveals the constant presence of damp, stagnant water. The air in the tepidarium hung heavy with moisture and the scent of communal sweat. Wealthy patrons utilized private slaves to maintain their hairless appearance with personal cleaned instruments. The laboring classes possessed no such luxury. They relied on the shared blades provided by the public bath facilities. These bronze razors passed from hand to hand without any standardized sterilization process. Microscopic analysis of these recovered implements confirms the presence of organic debris deep within the metal seams. The transmission of staphylococcus became an unintended consequence of the Roman aesthetic ideal. A small nick from a dull blade quickly turned into a festering lesion. The shared nature of the bathhouse floor allowed blood-borne pathogens to circulate through the runoff water. Foot rot and skin inflammation were common ailments among the urban poor who frequented these public spaces. The disparity between the classes manifested in the health of their skin. The elite remained polished through the services of the Alipilus, who used specialized personal tweezers. The poor accepted the risk of infection as the price of public participation. The therma functioned as a theater of social stratification. A man's status was visible in the quality of his grooming tools. The lower classes scraped their skin with rough stones or shared iron blades. These rudimentary methods frequently resulted in permanent scarring and deep tissue damage. The Roman physician Galen documented the prevalence of these chronic skin conditions in his clinical notes. He observed that the proximity of the masses facilitated the rapid spread of dermal diseases. The desire for a smooth, artificial appearance pushed the population toward these hazardous environments. The documentation shows that the pursuit of beauty ignored the biological reality of the setting. The Roman baths promised a transformation that the architecture could not safely provide. The elite walked away from the thermae with pristine skin and high social standing. The common laborer departed with the lingering threat of infection and the scars of a dangerous routine. The history of the Roman bath is a record of this brutal, silent divide. Every polished surface in the imperial capital masked the reality of the pathogens lurking in the steam. The history of human grooming was a record of persistent, calculated risk. Archaeological digs in Ur revealed copper razors buried in the dust of the 3rd millennium BCE. Ancient Egyptian papyri detailed the application of arsenic trisulfide to the skin. These substances dissolved hair by chemically burning the outer layers of the dermis. The Sushruta Samhita recorded the surgical use of the Kshura razor in ancient India. Greek historians like Herodotus documented the practice of singeing hair with open flames. Roman bathhouses relied on the Alipilus to manage the grooming of the elite. These slaves used tweezers and resinous waxes to maintain the desired aesthetic. The common people scraped their skin with rough stones or shared bronze blades. Pathogens thrived in the moist, stagnant air of the imperial bathhouses. Microscopic analysis of these ancient tools confirmed the presence of organic debris. Staphylococcus infections were a constant, hidden consequence of the public grooming ritual. The pursuit of a polished appearance often led to severe skin necrosis. Ancient civilizations prioritized this rigid aesthetic despite the biological cost of infection. The transition from flint blades to chemical agents marked 1,000 years of vanity. The desire for hairless skin remained a consistent, driving force across the Mediterranean. Every society created its own specialized method to enforce this standard. The cost was always paid in blood, scarring, and systemic toxicity. You walk through your day with a razor or a cream that you never truly question. You assume the tools in your cabinet are safe because they are modern, but they are just the newest iterations of an ancient, dangerous obsession. You are still chasing the same impossible smoothness that rotted the skin of the ancients. The blade has changed, but the cycle never ends.